All right, here we are, Friday, Jan 17, 2020, doing another live Q&A here on YouTube. I got a couple people who asked me to try to upload these Q&As as podcasts so that they could listen. So I'm going to try to figure that out today. And hopefully by the time you guys hear this, some of you are listening on your phones. So here we go. I'm going to start with some of these Instagram questions for now. So for those of you new to my Q&As, I've been posting the day before or the night before a Q&A on Instagram where people can submit questions and then I answer them in the live YouTube Q&A. Great. So I've got here a few interesting ones actually. Some for different reasons than the people necessarily think. So this is a question that says, can you do a detailed breakdown on brass movement resonance variations? And I have not the answer that he's going to want on this. This is exactly what I don't like in watches, like personally don't like. I really don't like getting too mired down in the details of things. And so these people who want like a taxonomy of every screw, of everything, this is why I don't deal in vintage watches. They're annoying to me. And so I just basically like, to me, early resonances are totally about the dial. And the really early ones have very sort of shiny kind of patina gold dials, and the later ones, the production basically got better, and so the dials are a lot more standardized, but they have a little bit less character. And then you have the sub dials, which some were whiter, some were more silver. But to get too mired down in the details is definitely not my thing. I'm not the guy for that. I can look at one and tell you if it's a good one or not as good a one, although all of them now are very sought after. But, go to Watches by XJX or somebody like that for this kind of this is this and this is that, and first gen and second gen. And I always find most of those to be wrong anyway. They're like the way that these watches were made, they had a bunch of parts and they would just grab them and throw them together because they're ordering from different suppliers. So a bunch of different dials, a bunch of different subdials, a bunch of cases, grab one, case it up, ship it out, we sold it. So it's not like each one was sequentially made. Anyway, okay, that's that. Let's get to some of these live questions. Manual or automatic, that's a question. I don't know, whatever's more appropriate for the watch itself. I don't have any major preference between the two. I've synced my schedule to work the pub trips in the UK. I know. I'm sorry about that. It's hard because my business is international, and so it's always hard to find the best times. I always think, what's the best time to upload on Instagram? What's the best time to upload on YouTube when I do have this like international audience? And ultimately, I've just settled on doing whatever is convenient for me. So 10 a.m. on Friday seems to be like the time that makes sense for me to do this. But I'm open to trying to work with that a little bit. Although, honestly, the likelihood would be that it pushes later, not earlier. And so I don't know. It's going to be a problem no matter what. I'm sorry about that. I do recognize it is an issue. Hi from Montreal. Hi from Ireland. Again, international audience. Very cool. Okay. Do I still own and wear the Grand Seiko GMT? No, I don't have a Grand Seiko right now. The kind of closest thing that I have that I wear a lot is a Rolex Submariner. I have a flat 4 green anniversary sub that I've had for a long time that I wear a lot. Thoughts on McGonagall? It's funny, I was just talking to Steven yesterday, I think. He messaged me, and he's such a nice guy and obviously like an extremely talented watchmaker. So I think, those are the good guys for sure. This up and coming independent brand question seems to come up every week. I don't know. I just don't think like that, I guess. I kind of evaluate everything as it comes out. Obviously, Akrivia is kind of the hot one now. And people also ask, like, what do I think is the future for Akrivia? I have no idea. I don't even know these guys. I've never talked to them. So they've made some good watches and obviously have a good point of view and are talented and are making smart moves. But your guess is as good as mine. It's very hard to make a brand. So this is what I learned from my time with Max and mB&F. It's one thing to come up with a good watch. It's a whole other to have another new model what Max does is totally mind-blowingly insane, and he has to work so hard to do it. To have 1 or 2 new models every year is like total insanity. But even every few years to have a new good thing come out is very difficult. So that's what I always look for from independent watchmakers is, yeah, okay, great. You made a good watch. Now let's see the second watch and then the third watch. And then what are you starting to stand for as a brand? How are you creating this? How are you shaping the kind of public narrative around your work? That's how I look at it. Hi from Germany. Hi from Hawaii. Very cool. Down-to-earth independent watchmaker. Wow, they're mostly pretty down-to-earth because these are like, watchmakers. They're workmen. They're on a bench. Kari Voutilainen is extremely nice. Roger Smith is very nice. I don't know. To me, I don't speak French, so I tend to like the guys who speak better English just because I can communicate better with them. But it doesn't mean that the other ones are not nice or something like that. What's on my wrist? I brought out my unique De Bethune jeweled DB28T. See if you can check it out. This thing's insane. I mostly wear it around my office or around my house. I don't have the guts to wear it out a lot of the time, but it's like the most beautiful watch that I've ever seen. Watch my YouTube review of this one if you haven't seen it. Okay. Who's the best watchmaker alive in your opinion? That's hard to say. I'm kind of on record as really liking Kari Voutilainen's work, so I'll go there for now. But very good arguments could be made for some other guys. I put Philippe Dufour in that list. I put Roger Smith in that list. Those are probably the 3 best arguments if you want to go that way. Let's go back to Instagram for a minute because there were a couple nice ones here. What are my chances of seeing a Voutilainen Cayenne in person? So if you don't know the Cayenne, this is a unique piece that he made with a Japanese lacquer studio, and I happen to have it in inventory. So your chances are none unless you buy the watch. I have it. It's in my bank vault. It's for sale. There's one of them that exists, and it's going to go wherever it goes. So wire me money, and then your chance is 100%, or don't, and you are likely never to see it. Oh, where will horology be 100 years from now? Wow, that's really far. I have no idea what the world will be like. That's so incredibly far. But I do like to think about 10 or 20 years from now. And I think there's, and in fact, a lot of times when I'm looking at my personal collecting or even how I'm going to buy for my business, I like to think sort of what will this look like in an auction catalog 10 or 20 years from now? What will be important? What will not be? So I think there's definitely a possibility that in 20 years, nobody wears a watch at all and this whole thing's gone. But it's not a very good possibility. It's maybe, 5 or 10%. And then the rest of it, I think that a lot of the big brand stuff now, because it's been so overproduced and there's just so much stuff, will not be viewed as being tremendously important or sought after. And that's why I really love the independent area, because I think if there are people that are into watches in 20 years, they're going to want these watches that were created by these incredibly talented artists with singular visions that really say something about the time and that sort of stuff. So that is that's how I look at it. But of course, I'm well on the record with that kind of worldview anyway. So who knows if I'm right or wrong. Is TickTocking your full-time job? Yes, absolutely. It's more than a full-time job. I don't know how I do all this myself. It takes a lot of time to find these watches. And then it takes a lot of time to negotiate buys, negotiate sells. And then on top of that, I do all my own photography for Instagram and all my own stuff for YouTube, and even my own shipping and all of it. So it is it's probably more than a full-time job. I think I probably work 80+ hour weeks, but it's pretty fun. Let's see what else we've got. I'm going to go quickly. I see there's a bunch here. I'm going to try to get to as many as I can, but I'm going to go quickly to back to these Instagram ones. This one says, do you think Avant Garde designs like mB&F or classic ones like FP Journe will be more popular in the coming decade? And this one's like a loaded question because, as I said, I don't know if you saw my Acrivia review lately of the Acrivia Tourbillon I had, but classic designs will always be more popular. It's just that most people want a normal looking watch. And so this really shouldn't be the metric that you look at. Like, obviously, the cabinet's open and bugging me. It doesn't surprise me that the round classic Acrivia is more popular than their initial, more unique K-shape. But it doesn't mean that it's a better watch. What is popular is not necessarily better. So yeah, round classic watches will always be more popular, but it's very important to recognize inspired designs and innovation in the watch world. Now, that's not going to be everybody's taste. After all, watches are a fashion accessory. That's one part of their life, is a thing that you wear on your wrist. And so you have to be comfortable wearing the thing. It says something about you to other people in the world who may be total strangers. And so, you have to be comfortable with that communication to others. And so for most people, they don't want to make the communication of the guy who's wearing the HM9 or something on his wrist. But that doesn't really mean anything. Okay. Do I see a trend in watch sizes moving down to more traditional 34 to 36? No, 34 to 36 is too small. I don't see a trend going down there at any point. I think 38 to 42 is definitely pretty good. And I don't know, again, it kind of goes back into my last thing. Classic watches will always be popular. I think that really means a 38 to 42 round watch will kind of always be the sweet spot from here on. 36 is too small, and 34 way too small to be kind of the main size. Those will be not mainstream, too small sizes. Not they're not cool. I mean, I love the Patek minute repeater that I had last year that was 34 millimeters. I wouldn't kick a duality out of my safe, but yeah, I think 38 to 42 is the main wheelhouse. I should consider hiring some people for the business. Yeah, I guess so. I'd love to find somebody who could really help me with my YouTube channel and my videos and that sort of stuff. I've tried to do a lot more production myself. If you look at my latest couple videos, I think they're a lot better than they had been. And I'm in my free time, I'm sort of getting into figuring that whole thing out. but I'm definitely not a professional. So we'll see how far I can take that before having to get somebody else to do it. Have I visited any of the workshops? And if so, which ones impressed me? I've visited some. The one that sticks out the most that I recall recently is Grubel 4C, which I'm well on record as being maybe my favorite brand. And they're everything you would expect in person. They're just, it's just insane what these guys are doing to somehow take like the highest quality and figure out how to make an entire production of that is very, very impressive. But in general, I don't really love traveling. I don't love work travel. And so I've kind of always avoided it as much as possible. I do what I have to do, but I kind of do the bare minimum. As much as I can run my job from my office, I try to do it. I've got a family. I've got a life here. I like being home. So that's that. Let me go back to Instagram here so I can try to get these done. Thoughts on Chronomet Blue value in the future and future prices of Journes in general? I don't like to speculate on future value that much. That's another part that I just don't think is that interesting in watches to me personally. I obviously a huge part of my business is figuring out what the current value of things are. And so I like to think obviously through that. And maybe that includes how much of a risk do I have in holding this, maybe let's say for the next 6 months or the next year, if it doesn't instantly sell. But aside from that, I don't really like to speculate what might happen in the next 5 or 10. I mean, I never would have thought that early Journes would triple in value in a year, or that Nautiluses would double or triple in value in a year. I'm the guy who sold my 5712 Nautilus that I wore every day for 32 grand because I thought it was crazy that somebody would pay me that much. So that it's not my particular strong suit in this business. Although I have seen over now 17 years of being into watches and independent watches, I have seen that the good stuff, like if I bought everything that I liked and I just held on to it, I would be like very, 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 very well in the money at this point. And a lot of them were the things that people said were, you know, not liquid or didn't hold their value, or you'd be better off buying, you know, whatever else instead. But if I bought and held the early Richard Milles that I loved, the early Journes, the you know, and mB&F, HM4, and the really early Urworks, or even the Urwork that I have, and Debethunes where I bought them, and Grubels where I could have bought them at various points, and that 5712 I just spoke of. You know, all these things were like the good things, and they've all proven that much. Vianney Antiqua, you know, I bought one of those for 30 grand once. Now they're 125 or 150. So buy what you like, be smart, have good taste, and I think you'll do well. My take on Nomos. Yeah, I think they're really cool. I've actually never owned one. I don't tend to buy watches in that kind of range. They don't really work for my business model. So there really isn't enough margin to ship them around and buy them and sell them and whatever. But the watches seem to be very high quality, and I like the design language that they use. So I'm a fan of the brand, but I've never owned one. Is the Omega Seamaster 300 a better watch than a Rolex Submariner? Wow, that's a heavy question, and I'm not an expert in that realm, but I would say no. Almost nothing's better than a Rolex Submariner as just a dive watch. It's like it's the quintessential watch in that arena. You can talk yourself into a lot of different things, and sometimes it's fun to go against the grain and whatever, but a Submariner is a Submariner. Let me see what else I've got here. This was a good question. I wish I had more time to think about it. What would I say are the 5 most important watches in production from independent watchmakers? This is a tough one. I would say the first that comes to mind is the DB28 from de Bethune. I mean, I happen to have the DB28T on my wrist, but you know, I think a lot about a lot of times independent watchmaking is a little bit like musicians or bands. A lot of times, either like the band's first album is the great album. You know, it's the one they've been working on like forever, and then finally got to produce, and it came out, and it's got all these great songs, and it's like the great thing. So similarly, a lot of times, a watchmaker's first watch is like the great watch that they make. But for others, it's a little bit of a process, and it's not until, you know, a little bit down the line that they really come into being what it is that they are and will be. And so for me, de Bethune is in that latter camp. Their early watches were sometimes cool, but unremarkable in general. And the DB28 to me is the quintessential de Bethune, with the movable lugs and the bridges and the shiny finishes and everything. And this is still currently in production. And so that's a big one to me. I have the yellow tones in stock, which you've got to go look at the photographs and the video of that one. It's like, I don't know. I don't actually know if the finish totally translates to photos and video. I do my best, but in person, it's like one of the coolest looking things I've ever seen. So that's one of them. Other really important independent watches in production. The Cartier Van Wheat, the 28, I think is really important. This is an independent watchmaker at the top of his game, making a really amazing watch. The Groeneveld 1941 is technically in production, although they've sold out of them. So they're now just finishing up the last several watches. So that one will be out of the running soon. But I think that's a really great watch. And I love their tourbillon also, but that's not in production. So this in production part is an interesting wrinkle, right? Because then you kind of have to think with like newer stuff or what's exactly going on now. I think Grubel still makes the double tourbillon technique in various guises. I think this is one of their most important watches and one of the greatest watches of the modern era. So I'd have to put that on the list. And I don't know, it is one I have to think about more. Okay. What else do we got? If I had to choose one peculiar non-mainstream movement feature to have on my watch, what would it be? I don't get totally lost in like features. I like whatever the execution is. So for example, like the 1941 remontoire that I just mentioned, I don't really care about a remontoire just for remontoire's sake, but it's very cool that it's on the dial and it turns every 8 seconds and gives some life to the dial and reminds you that something special is there. And it just really works with that watch, not to mention their story of it being a reminder of the clock in their hometown that their father is the caretaker of. And so I kind of like things for that sense. The only complication that I really love just for the complications sake is a minute repeater. So a minute repeater, a decimal repeater, or a grand and petite sonnerie. Those are like the complications that really get me going and I love. But the rest of it, it's just kind of a matter of like, does this make sense within the overall thing? Why does this exist? And does it just make it a cooler object, right? So like a good example of that is the mB&F LM Perpetual. I actually really don't like perpetual calendars. I find them to be kind of annoying to set. And I don't even set my normal dates, let alone perpetuals. And a manual wind perpetual is even like worse because you can't even just put it on a winder. However, it makes that watch so cool because it's a reason for all those dials. It's a reason for all those gears. It's a super classic, one of the classic complications, and mB&F has come up with an entirely new mechanical take on it, which is extremely impressive and very cool. And so that ends up being like an awesome watch because of the perpetual calendar. But if you asked me would I want a perpetual calendar in general, I would say no. So that's, I don't know, that's a look inside kind of my mindset and how I look at these things. There isn't anything that I would want just for its own sake other than a really great chiming feature. Okay, I'm gonna cut it there, guys. We've gone 25 minutes. Please save your questions. If you have more, come back. I'm gonna, again, continue, I think Friday at 10, but as I said early in this video, I'll look at that and see if maybe there's a better time. If there would be a better time for you guys, and it is like within reasonable working hours here in California, you can leave it in the comments, please. And also if there's a better day. I do Friday only because it's a little bit slower for me in the office on Friday. And so it's a good day for me. But if you have a day and a time that would be better for you, leave it and I'll see what I can do. And also I am going to see if I can start taking the audio from these and putting them up on the podcast so that you can listen to them, because there's no need to have to see these if you can't interact live anyway and submit questions. So look for this on, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, like wherever you get your podcasts as well. Okay, thanks guys. I will be back next week. Bye-bye.